Hollow Knight shocked me in a very good way. I've never really been a big fan of the Metroidvania gaming genre, and I've always seen platformer games as a little boring. Hollow Knight has completely changed my perception of these genres, and now I'm actively and even desperately seeking out more games like Hollow Knight. After playing Elden Ring and going down the From Software rabbit hole, I was looking for anything remotely similar to the Souls series. When I asked a friend for some game recommendations, he quickly directed me towards Hollow Knight. I played it for a bit, and I was immediately blown away by the stunning gameplay. Okay, that was a lie. I couldn't get out of King's Pass and didn't come back for months. And even when I did come back to the game and explored the first few areas, I wasn't particularly blown away by what I had seen. It wasn't until I fought what I think are some of the best bosses in the game, Hornet and the Mantis Lords, that this game really clicked with me. I really enjoyed the general gameplay loop, especially when it came to the boss combat system. Hitting all of the inputs at the right time, weaving around all the enemy's attacks, and hitting back in quick succession is an extremely engaging and addictive combat loop. As time went on and I got more access to more abilities, spells, and charms, the game really opened up for me and I began to love every single aspect of it. The build variety, bosses, platforming, and enemy types all get better as the game goes on. I'll talk about this plus a couple more topics individually, but I first want to talk about the areas in Hollow Knight. The areas honestly aren't anything special. Some of them have kind of a unique gimmick. The foresty feeling in Green Path and the Queen's Gardens, the jellyfish in Fog Canyon, and the poisony feeling in the Fungal Wastes. There are obviously a couple more unique looking areas that provide an interesting spin on Hollow Knight's mechanics, but my point is that these are few and far between. More than half of Hollow Knight's areas look and feel the same, and they only have slight visual changes. Howling Cliffs, Dirtmouth, Forgotten Crossroads, King's Pass, Deep Nest, Kingdom's Edge, Ancient Basin, and even the City of Tears at times all have the same general feel. They all feature rocky terrain with a gray color scheme. I haven't really looked into what the internet thinks about this game that much, but I guess that the main defense of these samey feeling areas would be that they all have some features that make them feel a little different. These very small distinctions don't do anything for me. Having cobwebs in the background or having black stuff flow up from the floor doesn't change the fact that I just stumbled into a new area expecting something new and interesting, but what I got was the Forgotten Crossroads with a filter on it. Despite this glaring flaw in the game's design, I still enjoyed Hollow Knight a lot, and it has become one of my favorite games. Part of this is because the actual areas and the terrain aren't something that impacted my opinion of the game. What I'm trying to say is that the game's atmosphere wasn't really an important factor while playing through it, and it wasn't necessary for enjoyment. When I think about Hollow Knight and my favorite or least favorite things about it, I think about the charms, bosses, combat system, platforming sections, but never the areas. I still think Hollow Knight could have benefited from a variety of atmospheres and area designs, and I hope that they do implement that into Silksong, but I see the areas as essentially just the backdrop to the actual gameplay content. Hollow Knight's story is also something that never really impacted my experience. It's kind of cryptic and it tries to be as subtle as possible. I don't have any positive or negative feelings about this, but the point is that the story was fairly simple and was a non-factor for me. I'm probably going to do some research on the story before Silksong comes out, just to understand what's going on, and when I do play Silksong, I'm definitely going to try and pay a little more attention to its story. Another thing I've always noticed about Hollow Knight is how all of the game's mechanics work better more towards the end. Since bosses like the Radiance, Nightmare King Grim, and the Pure Vessel are able to assume that you'll have all of the game's abilities, they end up being much more satisfying and just more enjoyable overall. While this endgame is better idea is somewhat true when it comes to the nail arts, nail upgrades, spells, or spell upgrades, it's mostly noticeable when it comes to the game's main movement abilities. Hollow Knight has 8 main ability upgrades. At the start of the game, you will only be able to walk and jump once, but at the end of the game, you will be able to dash, double jump, climb walls, do a super dash, teleport, roll through attacks, and fight while in poison. Without some of the more important movement abilities, there's only so much you can actually do with the first few bosses, enemies, and parkour sections. By the end of the game, however, you will be fighting enemies and bosses that force you to engage with like 5 different combat mechanics in order to evade their attacks and get a hit in. The same can be said about the endgame platforming sections as well. You can get through all of the Forgotten Crossroads without using your nail and just by jumping and walking in a particular direction. In the Path of Pain, however, you will be expected to crystal dash towards certain walls, double jump, dash, and roll through specific obstacles. Not to mention the fact that you have to pogo off moving buzzsaws, moving spikes, moving buzzsaws, more moving buzzsaws, a lot of moving buzzsaws. Why did the bugs have moving buzzsaws? They're bugs. How did they create moving buzzsaws? This is also there when it comes to you needing to have certain charms and damage numbers to defeat a boss easier. But this isn't unique to Hollow Knight, as it's pretty much in every game. And getting an upgraded nail isn't actually necessary to beat any of these bosses, it's just super highly recommended. Besides the times that this can feel artificial, like when there's a wall that's just 10 pixels high into the air, just out of reach, and oh look, I now unlocked an ability that allows me to jump exactly 10 pixels into the air. This artificial problem isn't really an issue when it comes to the bosses, because you probably won't be reaching them until you get to those areas that require those late game abilities in the first place. But at times, this wider gameplay loop of, oh, I got a +5 pixel jump ability, and oh, look, now I can get to that new area that's 10 pixels high, and oh look, I found a 10 plus pixel jump ability to get to the 10 pixel area, so I get to the 15 pixel area. It just feels kind of forced. I know it sounds like I'm critiquing the game, and I kind of am and will probably continue to do so. So I want to make it crystal clear that this is one of my favorite games, and I do think it's deserving of its overwhelmingly positive reviews, and I wouldn't even bat an eye if somebody said that they thought it was a 10 out of 10. I'm going to stop saying this in my videos from here on out, and I'll probably just put it in the description, but every piece of media, no matter how great, will have at least 5 or 10 flaws that can be found when looking at it critically. This is why it's really hard for me and many others to call anything a masterpiece or perfect. But what we can do is recognize what certain pieces of media do right and wrong, and we can evaluate them based on how close or how far away they are from being perfect. Anyways, I could go on and on about this game, but this is just a mini review where I share some of my thoughts about it. So if you want to see some more Hollow Knight content in the future, maybe talking more in depth about the charms, bosses, DLCs, or level design, then let me know by hitting the like button. I know I'd love to make more videos about this game, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. Hollow Knight is free on Xbox Game Pass, Silksong will be free on Game Pass Day 1, otherwise it's only $15 for a 20 to 200 hour experience. I would recommend that you buy it, I think it's a good game, and yeah, that's the end of the review.